I got the walk, there's a longboard walk. I know the talk, the longboard talk. I know the talk.
Alrighty. So, hey guys, everywhere from around Australia and the world. This is episode 24 of Oz Longboarding. I've got the hosting duties tonight being, we've got a Victorian guest on. We've got legendary Bob Smith. Amazing repertoire of amazing Australian titles. He's got over 23 Victorian longboarding titles. And just a true amazing Australian and Victorian bloke. Before we go to Bob, we'll just do a quick lap around the country and we'll start off with our normal host, Weeksy. How's it been up there in WA, mate?
G'day, Nathan. What a fantastic start to the show. I think that's the best in the last 24 episodes by far, except for the one that Kira did. No, but it's been a good week, mate. We've had sort of 3.5 metre swells for the last couple of days and a howling easterly, so offshore wind, which is very unusual for here. And there's these little native bees that breed at this time of the year, and the whole coast has been flooded, so the fish are going nuts, and it's been great fun. It dropped off a little bit today, so I went for a shortboard surf, and tomorrow morning should be really dropped off a little bit more, so down to about a 2 metre swell, which is perfect for where I live. And I'm super excited because, whoop, there we go. I got that new little toy yesterday. So Barry Bennett's single fin, which I'm looking forward to waxing up and taking for a spin. And, well, that's tomorrow. So, yeah, it's been a good week. Thanks, Nath. Looking forward to chatting with Bob.
For sure. We'll go to you, Sean. How's the week been up there in Kira, Queensland?
Mate, it's been a little bit of a mixed week. We've had reasonably good waves, 2 to 4 foot on the southern points. We've had a few onshores as well, but we've been getting afternoon storms. I mean, humdinger storms coming through and cleaning up the surf, and it's been all right. It's been beautiful days. Just great time of year to be up here in Queensland.
Good one. Good to see you got a nice shirt on tonight too.
Yeah, just so I don't get run over, while I'm sitting here doing the show. Yeah.
Good one. Good one. And we've just been joined by Matty up in Sydney, mate. How you going?
Yeah, good guys. Thanks for having me on. Sorry I missed last week. Spontaneous road trip. One of those 24-hour day trips that ends up dragging on till about 36 hours. Oh, I'll wait, surf the next morning and then, wait for the tide, and it ends up going a little bit longer than you expected. So I was on the highway, missed last week's episode, but I made it back for this episode. I was doing the same thing, shooting out of Sydney, just getting some waves away from the crowd. And yeah, it's been a weird spring week of waves. If you know where to look and you know where the banks are and what's working with the tide, there's actually been some amazing longboard waves. We did have our 5 ways interclub contest the week before last at Manly Beach. It was between the 5 Northern Beaches clubs, so Palm Beach, Longreef, Kelkel, Freshwater, and Manly. My club, Longreef, won last year. This year it was Manly that took the win over Kelkel. Longreef coming in 3rd. And then Freshwater 5th and Palm Beach are in 4th. So it's quite funny because it used to be a very dominant area in longboarding, the Northern Beaches, dating back to sort of the 90s and 2000s. You had really rich talent coming from the Northern Beaches. You had guys like Cameron Gray, Hayden Swan, Bo Young was surfing on the Northern Beaches as well, and Gary Burden from Astro Surfboards. There was a whole host of really good surfers, but as Bob would know this, who's our guest for tonight, some of our over 60s, well now over 70s competitors are dynamite. Bruce Channon, Lyndon Riley, Steve O'Donnell, those 3 names are guys that just lit up the comp scene since my whole life. So it's really cool to watch those guys in action as well.
Sorry, Nath, sorry to jump in, mate. Is Matty Cook still surfing down there, Waxhead?
Yeah, he's on the south side, but he sort of popped up for a couple of years, and he wasn't really around when I was a Grom. I think more mid-2000s sort of he started doing the comp scene. But yeah, he's Cronulla, sort of south side.
Oh, that's right. I knew it was someone that had a rugby league team.
No, it's good to hear comps are back in most states as well. It's nice to hear that you've got some comps going up there in New South Wales.
I was actually really nervous. It's funny you mentioned that. It was the first proper contest since the Noosa Festival, and I was really, I guess 'cause I was surfing for the club and, you want to do well and stuff, but yeah, it was really unusual. It was probably the most nerve-wracking I had been in a very long time, and I could imagine it was the same for everyone else. So it was good to have that sort of competitive juice back.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, good to hear. Yeah, so tonight we're not joined by Kira. She's got a heap of work to do up in Noosa, and Twiz has come down with a bit of the man flu. So hopefully you're all right, Twiz, and look forward to hopefully having you on next week. In Vico, I'm sure Bob can tell us a bit more about the waves, but it's been howling southeasterly all week. Not great surf. The wave pool in Melbourne's just open, so regional surfers like Bob and I, we haven't been able to actually, well, I've been going for work, but regional surfers haven't been able to go down yet. That'll open up on the 8th of November, but Melburnians within 25 Ks of the pool have been able to enjoy that. So that's been a nice little escape, I think, with the waves being so bad here. But we'll throw it over to our guest tonight. It's the first time we've had a Victorian guest on. Bob Smith, any Victorian, we certainly look up to Bob. He's an amazing surfer, amazing guy. As I was saying before, he's got 2 Australian Masters surfing titles, 23 Victorian longboard titles. He's the historian for RipCurl, the Surf World Torquay Museum, and also a life member of Surfing Vic. And he's also got 2 Surfing Australia Hall of Fame awards. So welcome to the show, Bob Smith. Great to have you on, mate.
Great. Thanks, Nathan. Yeah, great intro. And I sort of can't take my eyes off of that wave behind Sean. Yeah, what a beautiful wave from Agnes, I believe. And great to see Maddie on there also. One of the reasons that I love going to all these comps up and down the coast is you see people like Maddie and the outstanding surfing that they do, and it's a real inspiration.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So have you been getting in the water this week, Bob? I was saying it's been southeast, but it's been a few little windows to get out. Have you been out and about?
Yeah, it's been a pretty shocking week. The southeasterly, our devil winds, they've been up around 35, 40 knots, and it's almost been unsurfable. We had a break yesterday. The winds backed off a bit, and there was still a mixture of a bit of ground swell and wind swell in there. So, yeah, I had a surf out at uncrowded Torquay Point. But as happens down here, when the southeasterlies drop off a little bit, the wind swell disappears really quickly also, and it was basically unsurfable today, sort of flat.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm sure it's the same around everywhere in Australia, but you can probably attest just how busy it's been in Victoria lately. I guess probably no one's been working. Everyone's an online uni student my age. It's been busy, hey?
Yeah, well, we've got the Ring of Steel around that Dan's put on, so that's kept a few people away. But yeah, there have been a few people. I've recognised a few Melbourne people sneaking down and getting out there. A lot of people obviously not working. They're in the water, so you've just got to be water smart, street smart. You know, as you know, Nathan, I'm up out of bed 5:30, 20 to 6, and heading around in the dark and looking at the tides all the time. And you know, you look at a day, a really nice day at, say, Small Winky, and the wind's been northeast, and you know it's going to swing northwest sometime during the day. So you go like an hour, 45 minutes before the wind swings, and you can still score some really nice uncrowded sessions.
Yeah.
How long has that been your program, Bob, on that morning sort of search?
Well, I guess most people out there know I've got a teaching background, and with a teaching background, you know, school starts at 9 o'clock, teaching here in Torquay. So you've got 2 choices. You sleep in and you go to school and you teach, and then you go surfing after school, or you get up in the dark and you go surfing and score some waves before school starts. Which puts you in a fantastic frame of mind. So I've always been a dawn patroller, never got out of the habit, and I'm a firm believer in that first 45 minutes to an hour after the sun comes up. There's a little more energy in the waves, and that seems to dissipate a little bit as the day goes on.
Yeah, I 100% agree with you on that. You know, as that sun's sort of rising and that swell energy, I was talking to of all people, it was actually a German photographer he's got a very good eye for surf photography. And we had a really good chat, and he loves the early morning sunrises, but I said I'm more of an 8 o'clock kind of guy. I'll set up my workshop and set my staff up, and I'll find out by then, where's cracking, because I'll see everyone's Instagram posts, or, the surf report pops up or whatever. But I already know the banks I want to go surf. But he said, oh, no, it's really interesting. He goes, the waves are bigger in the morning. And I looked at him like, dude, you serious? And we started chatting about it, and he started to make sense. He said, yeah, look, he goes, I shoot most mornings to sunrise. And he said, it just seems like there's more waves, and the waves are better at the beginning. And I said, oh, that's the wind, playing tricks on you and making it look better. And he goes, no. He goes, I count the waves with, when he's through the viewfinder. And he said, there's more waves in the morning. It was really interesting that you mentioned that as well.
100% believer in that. And I think the other thing in my favour is I'm very fortunate to live beachfront here at Jan Jacques, and the swell predictions the following day might be for like southwest winds, but then you look out the window and you look at the clouds, and the clouds are moving from the northwest and the wind's starting to drop, and there's going to be at least maybe an hour and a half, 2 hours of really nice offshores before the southwest comes in. So it's being a bit like, Johnny on the spot and knowing the local conditions.
Do you know Michael Stone by any chance, Bob?
Michael Stone.
What happens is while we're on air, people can type in their messages and stuff on Facebook. And Michael Stone says preschool surfs make the teaching day better. Is it better for your Is it better for your students if you get your wave in the morning?
100%. Yeah.
Okay, certainly better for Michael Stone to get waves before school too. No,
Actually, Nathan, there's also another message that's already popped up. It's the first time I've ever seen this in 24 episodes. Great intro, Nathan Riverland. And that was from a lady called Julie Riverland. So,
Julie the mum.
Yeah, so I guess we'll touch on a lot of things later. But firstly, Bob, how did you get into surfing? Where did it all start for you?
I was one of those guys, I guess, a little bit like a Westie and a Brizzo, and I lived in landlocked a suburb in Melbourne called Thornbury, knocked around the Thornbury, Preston area. There was no surf there at all, not like the boys on the bay who could at least windsurf. I was a very strong swimmer, school swimming champion, and always hanging around the Northcote baths and the Brunswick baths, and right through summer and part of winter also. So I felt confident in the water. I had my cousin, who's an only child. He moved from Brunswick down to Belmont in Geelong. So I used to get invited down there a fair bit, and he had a surfboard. And his dad used to put us in the car, drive us down to Torquay, and Dad would go home and he'd just leave us at the beach all day. So I'd just jump on the board, or my cousin stooged me very, very early in the piece. We're at the Torquay front beach, and I saw all these beautiful boards lying around on the lawn and on the wall. And my cousin went to St. Joey's in Geelong, and he said, oh, see all those boards over there? He said, go and grab that one. He said, I know the guy, I go to school with him. So, yeah, dumbass Bob, he's gone over and grabbed this board and fooling around down in the shallows. And next minute I see my cousin racing off towards Point Danger, and some big thumper from the surf club come running down with his fist in the air and threatening me. And so, yeah, nice introduction.
That's lovely.
Yeah, sorry, but there has to be a certain, without being cheeky or anything, because, I don't like to do that. But when you first started out with surfing and swimming, I'm guessing wetsuit technology wasn't quite what it is these days. So that must have been a fairly special sort of character to become an ocean swimmer in Victoria.
Yeah, for sure. Swimming was a really popular sport. We had the Olympic Games in 1956, and after that, everyone wanted to be like, Murray Rose or Dawn Fraser, and swimming was really, really huge. And everyone was hanging around swimming pools and, training, and it was really, really popular. So if you were going to end up in the surf, it was always felt that it was important to be a good swimmer. I guess the other factor there was, we were very working class. Dad was out working, Mum stayed at home, 4 kids, and our Christmas holidays were down at Rye and Rosebud. And once again, you had an opportunity to get in the water for 2 or 3 weeks over summer, just in the bay. But then when you maybe 14, 15, you'd hitchhike round to the back beaches at Rye and Portsea and go body surfing. And I think that built up a bit of confidence also.
Now, Mrs. Marlin's little boy Michael sent me some emails during the week, Bob, as he does, and he sent me through this saying 1956 Australian Surf Championships for the Olympics. Now, I was trying to do some mental arithmetic, and there's no way Bob won that in 1956. So how did this come to be in your position and your possession? And what are you doing?
Yeah, some wonderful things have come my way. That's one of Torquay's most desirable pieces of memorabilia. All the old surf clubs, they would die to get their hands on one of these. As you probably know, I have a history of working at Surf World Museum, and attached to the museum is the Visitor Information Centre where they have volunteers. There was this beautiful old man called Russ Mole who had kids in Torquay who were well-known surfers. Russ used to have one of them on the front of his car, and they used to go on the grill of the car and then attach them with pieces of wire so no one could just pull them off. And I used to say to Russ all the time, Russ, you've got to take that off your car. It's going to disappear. And I kept at him, and he kept saying, no, I'm in and out of the shops, and I park at front end and no one's going to take it. And I was in there one day and he said, oh, you really, really like that car emblem, don't you, Bob? And I said, oh, I just love it. He said, come round to my place. So I've gone round there, and he had two more in the garage. And he just grabbed one off the garage bench and handed it to me. And I just said, "Oh, look, I've got to get you something, Russ. That's just so special." And he's gone, "Oh, I'll tell you what you can do." He said, Russ was a very older school, patriotic Australian. He said, "I love Australia Day. I love to fly my flag on Australia Day. Can you get me a flagpole?" So I went out and got him a flagpole and put his flag up. And I guess one really nice thing is from my place, you could see his place up on the hill, and the next Australia Day, I've got the binos out and he's up there with the flagpole and a stubby, and I rang him up. So we're just having this lovely chat about the flagpole and the 56 car badge.
Would, just to add, a more visual picture to that image, because the first thing I thought of when I saw that badge was like, oh, it looks like a really cool, car accessory, something from the 50s. What kind of car did he have?
By that stage, he had a fairly, when he gave me the badge, he had like a modern car. I think it was a Ford. Back in the day, they all had old bombs, of course, and hanging around the Torquay camping ground. But I think talking to Russ was just one of those beautiful people from another era that could talk story and just tell you so many wonderful things about, the old, the Boot Hill days in Torquay and the troubleshooters and the mischief they got up to, and like driving around in old cars with a keg of beer in the back and squirting all the tourists. And it was like a Wild West town back in the day in Russ's time. And he's a great storyteller. We miss him greatly.
Hey,
the other thing that's really interesting about 1956, and we've been led to believe that from an historical surfboard perspective, that the shortboard era came in 1967 with the reduction in size of the Malibus to the V bottoms. And, that's been played up a fair bit and cut a foot off one week and cut a foot off the next week sort of thing. Well, you look back to 1956 and, in my opinion, that's the beginning of the shortboard era. They were riding 16-foot toothpicks, and then basically overnight they went down to 9 to 10-foot longboards. So, there's 6 foot of coming off the board, first shortboard revolution.
Yeah, that's something that I'm sure a lot of our listeners are tuning in now are aware of, but that 56 Olympics was pivotal in so many aspects. Bringing those lifeguards over from America, but Torquay being one of the showcase locations, along with, I think it was Avalon and Cronulla, which were the locations that the first shortboards, the first turns that really anyone was doing in Australia was during that period from the Melbourne Olympics. And Torquay was one of those places that showcased the modern Malibu surfboard. Not a lot's changed since.
No. And who cares whether it was Cronulla or Avalon or Torquay? It happened. It doesn't matter which beach saw them first, which people saw them first. It was revolutionary and a great moment in Australian surfboard history.
Well, we're not making
I
money
agree
off
with
it
you, Bob.
personally.
It seems like for some people it really, really does matter.
I know. Who was the first person to surf Bell's Beach? Wow, you get into some discussions about that down here.
I bet.
Hey, Bob, a few viewers are wondering, how'd you get the nickname Boardroom Bob?
Yeah, I was writing for Australian Longboard magazine under Bruce Channon, just one of the most amazing people, and Bruce is just inspiring, and every time I threw some ideas at him, he encouraged me. But Mick Marlin was doing the WA bit, and Mick was Malibu Mick, and I guess I was influenced by that. I thought I'd like to come up with an interesting name, so I thought Boardroom Bob fitted in pretty well with Malibu Mick.
That's pretty awesome. Hey, Brad Bowen's commenting on the Facebook, just saying Kira's recovering from a girl grom coaching lesson this morning, and then she had work to do, so she must be absolutely stuffed. Anyway,
Well,
yeah.
On those lines, what have you done to annoy Twiz, Bob? Because he reckons he's sick, but he's watching.
No idea.
Jack's a champion, and he's been flat out with work, but he was very, very disappointed he wasn't well enough to join us tonight. So he obviously has a lot of respect for you as well. We kept speaking of mentioning Mick Marlin, but Mickey sent through a couple of photos, and I was actually, I've got a few from yourself as well, Bob. But I was just wondering if maybe this picture has anything to do with the nickname.
Well, I have been known, I've had a lot of nicknames over the years, and one of them was Strapper Bob for a little while, and I've ridden Strapper boards since they started in 1976. So I'd actually ridden them just before that, before the company was actually set up. Strapper is Dennis Day. Dennis Day is a very close personal friend of mine, great surfer. Played a lot of A-grade squash with him. He was a fierce competitor. He was really good in the water. He pushed me and encouraged me into getting into some more challenging waves. I remember one instance in particular. We'd gone around a Winky Pop, and it was solid. You know, like it was like a 6 foot swell. And when Winky's 6 foot, there's bigger sets out there, as we know, the same as any break. It was dead low tide, and you know, Winky at dead low tide on a pretty decent sized swell can be pretty demanding, and you're always thinking of the reef a little bit. There's a fair bit of reef exposed there, and Winky's one of those waves when it's got a bit of size and you wipe out, it actually compresses you really hard on the reef, and it's hard to get back up, whereas Bells rolls you around a lot more. So I'm out there with Dennis, and I'm a little bit wary with the lowness of the tide. We had an A-grade squash match that night, and so I think I was taking a little bit easy, but Dennis didn't know how to take it easy. So I'd had a wave, and I'm paddling back out, and I've seen Dennis hurtling towards me, Strapper this is, and he just mistimed. The lip hit him, and it's just slammed him face first onto the reef, and he's come up, and there's blood everywhere, and he's got teeth missing. And all I could think of, well, I thought of two things. I hope he's all right. But then we've got this A-grade squash match that night against Werribee, the top team. I'm going, well, there goes our win. So we called an emergency in, and the match was starting like at 7:30, and about 25 past 7, Dennis has rocked in, got no front teeth. He's got about 3 front teeth missing, hadn't been to the doctors. He's gone, right, ready, off we go. And he just ran himself into the ground, and that was just a sign of, you know, how sort of tough he was, and I'm using that as an example of how he influenced me and helped push me into some challenging waves. But great shaper, great person, and I've been with them ever since. And as Nathan would know, Mick DeSasio eventually took over, and Mick is another very, very close friend of mine. So going back to the photo, that was the shop, the Strapper shop, the second Strapper shop that's been set up, and Mike and I had a chat about it, and it had the curved roof, and we spoke about putting boards in there. So quite a few of those boards came from my personal collection that I passed on to Mike, and he asked me to keep a bit of a lookout for any strapper boards that might be floating around. And it's one of those shop front scenarios where people walk in there and they just stand there staring at the boards for like 10 or 15 minutes. It really works.
Pretty awesome. And,
It's a
Bob,
beautiful
that-
display. Sorry, mate. I'm being the annoying guy that jumps over top of you like I normally do. So you spoke before about that bumper that from the Olympics as being a sought after trophy, but this one here, this is one that shortboarders, longboarders, everyone in the world wants to get this one in their hands. Tell us a bit about 1964.
Oh, now we're talking. Another very good friend of mine, Mick Dooley, won in 1964. In 2011, we had the 50th anniversary of the RipCurl Pro coming up. And part of my job, I had an absolutely wonderful year the year before that working for RipCurl. My job at RipCurl was as archivist historian, 2 days a week, permanent part-time. And part of my job that year was to talk to the older winners and also to work with an absolutely brilliant journalist and person called Michael Gordon, who has since passed away, who wrote the RipCurl book, the beach, the surfers, the contest.
It's a ripping book, that one.
And basically a year of my work was working with Michael as his research assistant, and he was just so wonderful to work with. But going back to the bell, we sat down at RipCurl one day and we spoke about the upcoming 50-year situation, and part of my job was to contact all the older winners, and they all said exactly the same thing. We had Glenn Ritchie, Doug Andrew, Mick Dooley, Rob Keneally. They all said exactly the same thing. The only thing they wished they had was a bell. Now, the bell hadn't been invented, so to speak, or thought of when they won. The first bell came about in 1968, and Ted Spencer won the first one and the second one. So the winners before that didn't have a bell. So we sat down at RipCurl one day in the main conference room, and Neil Ridgway, who was just absolutely wonderful to work with and another wonderful person, Claw, and we just came up with this idea that we should give them a retrospective bell, and it just worked beautifully. They were just absolutely ecstatic.
Mate, some of these images you've sent through. So this is Mick Dooley in '64.
These are from the book.
Some of these are great, but I love the quotes that go along with them. So he's saying here, look at who else has won over the years. That there's some pretty handy names on that list of bell owners, isn't there? But I think I like Bob Keneally's one the best. So this is Doug Anderson's Andrew saying everyone wants a bell, but I like this one here. If you think I'm weird, just wait. I'm just the tip of the iceberg. You better get used to us.
Yeah, that was the one when he moved to WA, to Margaret River, and he said, the hordes are coming.
Just recently, Bert Berger from Sonova Surfboards has told me that he's found some old footage from Margaret River when it was about a 40-foot day. And the biggest wave that I've ever caught that I can think of, and it broke from main break right across to the box. And I took off on this huge thing because I was scared of what was coming behind it. And as I kind of bottom turned and realised it was closing out across the entire bay, Robert Keneally appeared on my inside. He must have been a good 30 metres deeper than me on this thing. It was a 40-foot wave all day, every day. And he appeared, and I kind of looked at him and he looked at me, and he kind of shrugged his shoulders and jumped off. And I was like, oh, shit, is that what you're supposed to do? So I did the same thing. But I can't wait to find the footage. But Rob is certainly he's very cherished as a West Australian surfer. But, of course, he is an import, as you say.
I talk to him quite often. He and I are just, once again, beautiful people. And it made me think when I rang Rob up and was chatting to him about, coming back to bells and doing the retro bell. And I said to him, how you going, Rob? You're getting on a bit now? You're still going out at Margaret's when it's about 18 foot or so? He's gone, oh, geez, Bob, no. Think I'm slowing down a bit. I still go out when it's 12 to 15 foot, but over that, I'm not too sure anymore. What?
And just for the viewers at home, that doesn't mean the front of the wave is 12 to 15 foot tall. He's meaning 12 to 15 foot swell. So that's a 25-foot wave right there that Rob's. And he's very humble as well. So it's probably 18 foot and he's just talking it down a bit.
Extremely humble. Yeah, beautiful people. The other thing I remember about, well, my very first Oz title was in the shortboards. It was my first year in the Masters in the over 35s, and they happened to be in WA. And it was when, in the Margaret River area, it was when Rob and I had the health food shop there and had some wonderful chats with them then. And I think it was about day 3 or day 4, and the swell jacked up dramatically, and all the, you know, the 12-seater buses, all the team buses, they pulled up at the top of Margaret River, and it was really difficult to tell how big it was because there was no one out in the water, and we're looking at it, we think, oh, it's, you know, it's probably about 10 foot or so. And then suddenly Gary Elkerton, Kong, and his mate Bruce Fitzgerald from up on the Sunshine Coast, they're down on the beach and they've started to paddle out, and they got about halfway out and the set started to come. We're going, no, it's nowhere near 10 foot, it's more like 20 foot sort of thing. And they're paddling out, and I reckon it must have been a 7-wave set, and each wave seemed to be getting bigger and bigger. And as you know, Jason, the wind's often really, really strong there and blowing the spray off the back. And they're paddling over these sets, and I think it was about the 3rd wave, and Kong has spun around and caught this wave, and it seemed to take like 30 seconds for him to get to the base of the wave, and he rode it right down to the river mouth. Meanwhile, Bruce is still paddling over these monsters, and he decided to take probably the biggest wave that came through, and he got pitched from the very lip to the bottom of the wave, and you're watching him, and like you're almost drowning just watching him. And he didn't come up for about 20 seconds, and you're thinking, like, the poor guy's going to die. They came in, going, right, South Point, we're going to South Point. So thank goodness.
If you're talking,
they couldn't have run an event out there.
If you're talking to Rob, ask him about like one of the highlights of my surfing career. Last time I saw Rob was actually at Greg Lorenzen's funeral wake. Greg Lorenzen, of course, from Rusty Surfboards, one of Australia's best shapers ever. And I was recounting that story to Rob, and he reckons he remembers. He goes, "Oh yeah, remember that one?" But we would probably carried a good 100 meters underwater, so we were way out to sea, and we popped up really close to the front of the lagoon. So, and he wasn't young in those days either, but he was still out. There was only 5 of us out there: Bert Berger, Paul Patterson, Ant-Man, Damon Eastaugh, and Rob. That was it. And he was out there leading the way, and like I say, taking off deeper and further out than anybody. But what an amazing guy!
Big
But
wave
actually,
surfing.
I wanted to know something about this photo here, Bob. So, because were you part of that heat first thing in the morning at Yelling Up before it was cancelled and moved to Injured Up?
No, I wasn't. They'd called it off and moved it round there, and they're the ALB guys, Australian Longboarding team, with Bruce and Mick and myself, Malibu Mick, Boardroom Bob, and the wonderful Bruce Channon. And yeah, unfortunately, one of us had to miss out, and unfortunately, it was me. And Mick, I think Mick may have finished up 2nd in that one, and Bruce maybe 3rd or 4th.
I was just watching the footage from that day just recently, actually, because I pulled out a bit of the juniors. But I want to know how someone managed to get a photo without a wave in the background on that day, mate.
Well, it was probably a bit like bells on a small day. You know, you get 4-foot sets, and then there's no sets come through, as a lot of the pros know, and they get caught out there. And there was a kelp bed right at the end of the wave, and if you didn't flick out at the right time, you ended up in this massive kelp trying to untangle yourself.
Yeah, the shore break there claims some victims. But
Wave was fun though.
Mickey Marlin, great waves that day. And you old boys, and the juniors really were impressive that day as well. Bowie Pollard, I remember, got a couple of really mean barrels. But so Mickey Marlin sent through some good photos. So obviously you've had some rivalries over the years. Who's your Who's the guy you least want to come up in against the heat for whatever reason? And in contrast, who do you most enjoy surfing with in a competition scenario?
Oh, look, a lot of people just hate coming up against Danny Bond in a heat, but I actually really like it. Danny's a very close friend of mine. He and Lorraine have been very thoughtful and very kind to me through a period of illness. You know, they are just wonderful, wonderful people. And Danny's got a little bit of white line fever, and I love that. You know, he goes out there and he's out there to win, and he'll readily admit that. And I see that as a really good positive thing. He's won something like 20 Oz titles, and he deserves every single one of them. And I think anyone who goes in competition surfing, you should aspire to be like Danny Bond and Nev Smith. There was a wonderful final up at Port Macquarie at Town Beach, and there was Nev, Danny, myself, and I think Coxie might have been the fourth one. And we got a bad tide. The tide was dropping to low, and you know, the rips coming out through the river there. And Danny was almost unbeatable. Nev had been second, I think, 4 or 5 times, never won an Oz title. Nev paddled over to a different spot and pulled off 2 waves out of his bum, so to speak, and they were the best 2 waves that came through, and he had it won from his first wave, and the rest of us are scratching around. And I managed to just pip Danny, and for Nev to win, I was just so pleased for him. And I mean this in the nicest way, I was just so thrilled to come second and beat Danny, even though I didn't win. So first felt fantastic, and that was a good example of how sometimes coming second is a really, really good thing. And
my missus says the same thing.
Well, you look at Peter Norman, you know, the great 200-meter runner, and in the Mexico City Olympics, and you know, the 2 fastest guys in the world at the time from America, Tommy Smith and John Carlos. Peter made the final, wasn't expected to really get anywhere, and Tommy Smith had to run a world record to beat him, and Peter beat John Carlos into 3rd place. And then there's the famous Black Power salute, and you know, Peter Norman has just gone into the history books as you know, from that one event by coming second. And the other little thing that I thought of then while talking about Peter Norman, it was a year, at the end of the year, I moved to Torquay. It was 1972 and the Munich Olympics were on, and I was teaching a grade 6. And when you're teaching, and it was social studies back then, whenever the Olympics were on, you always did a unit of work about the Olympic Games. And so Olympic Games time and grade 6, and suddenly I hear this little knock on the door, and this little blonde-headed girl from the infant grade prep or grade 1 has come in, and she's gone, "Oh, Mr. Smith, I've got some show and tell for you." And she's held out her hand, and here's Peter Norman's silver medal in her hand, and it was Peter Norman's little girl. You've got the medal in your hand, and it's just one of those, you know, goosebump moments that is really, really special in your life, and coming second can be fantastic.
Funny that you mentioned show and tell, just as a comment comes up here. Interestingly, there's a lot of big names in longboard surfing who are watching the show tonight who don't normally watch, Bob, so thanks for bringing us a new demographic. But Pete Murphy says, it's a great guest, Rivo, says obviously for you, Nate. We love when he comes into our office all excited with some amazing board or some other piece, and always a great story about what it is and where it's from. So you're obviously still a frother. How do you keep that froth alive? What's the secret?
Yeah, look, there's a great Jimmy Buffett song. I'm a big fan of Jimmy Buffett. The song's called "I'm Growing Older, but Not Up." And I think it's really important not to grow up. You can grow old, but never grow up. And the surfing Vic crew, I think all organisations, people go in there, and they go in there for one reason only, and that's to whinge and complain. So, you know, you make a point. They've got wonderful people in there. You've got Adam Robbo and Cale Bell-Warren and Murph, and you just call in, and I'll find an old surfboard, and Cale and Robbo, they just froth on it. So I go in there and they down tools, down work, and, you know, we're there 45 minutes later still talking about the board and a bit of history and where'd you get it from and who'd you rip off and all that sort of thing. And it's a really nice thing to do.
Hey, Bob, I'm backtracking a bit because we had those photos up of all the strapper boards before, but being their longest team rider, they gave you a pretty special present one Christmas. What was it?
Oh yeah, the Strapper Christmas party. It can be a little bit like the RipCurl Christmas parties. Pretty wild and a lot of fun. And yeah, it was 40 years of Strapper, and Mike had made up 40 like anniversary surfboards, special surfboards. Twin Strappers were really well known for their twin fins, a little bit like the Mark Richards twin fins in that era, and I loved surfing them. And wood ply fins and swallow tails and really sharp abrupt flyers. They worked really well around here. So Mike decided to do a limited edition run of 40 after 40 years of Strapper, and I thought, oh, what a great idea. And he spoke to me and we had some input about it, and and that was the end of the story. And then at the Christmas party for that year, they're making a few some speeches and presentations and talks, and suddenly Mike said, oh, I've got a special presentation to make, and they presented me with board number 1, so which I had no idea about. So once again, there's that friendship aspect, loyalty aspect that I think is really important.
Well,
Wonderful moment.
How do we get hold of one of
that
these
t-shirts you got on there, Bob?
I get that out about once a year for a special occasion. I worked in ad promo at RipCurl, and we've got another wonderful person, Mark Flan, and he was doing all the events, and he's gone up to Threadbow for the event up there one year, and he's come back with these bumper stickers and these T-shirts that say, "Who is Bob Smith?" and he's given them to me. And if you look closely at the T-shirt, you can see the Smith Eyewear logo on there.
Yeah.
By coincidence.
They went really hard on that slogan for a year. I was sponsored by them at the time.
And they were big on the ski fields with their, as you probably know, their eyewear, their ski goggles. And by coincidence, the founder of Smith Eyewear, his name was Bob Smith. So they did some T-shirts up for him, and Flan noticed them and brought a couple back for me.
Made for you, mate. Literally, your name was all over it.
So we've spoken about the bell, but seems like you've got some other pretty lovely little awards there. I'll go back and into that little section there, but it just seems like you've got some fairly special trophies. I'll just flick up to the top here for a second. Oh, screen sharing stopped. But you've picked up some nice little mementos for your service to the sport as well. Can you tell us a bit about some of those? I'll just try and bring that back up again. But you got lifetime membership awards and that sort of thing. Does it start to make you feel like, how does that feel? I mean, it must be a great feeling, but does it also, you sort of feel like letting people know that, hang on, I'm still out there swinging? It's like, where do you that?
If you belong to a club, you've got to put in. And I always saw that as important in putting in lots of different ways. Like you go in the club and you learn a lot. You learn how to surf better. You learn how to surf a comp. But you've got to put in, you've got to carry the box of Guernseys, down the cliff at Winky Pop sort of thing. When we Torquay Border Riders had comps at Winky Pop, you got a tent put up. You got to pack up, and sometimes around clubs you see guys dodging those things, and so you can put in and you can contribute to a club in lots of ways, just beyond being a good surfer and going out and surfing. So I was very honoured to be voted in as a life member of Torquay Board Riders, Victoria's strongest shortboard riding club. And then I was also very honoured to be voted in as a life member of Surf Coast Longboarders, Victoria's best longboard club, and a long history with Surfing Victoria. And very, very honoured, of course.
So life member of Surfing Victoria. I like this one here, the Hall of Fame at the Australian Surfing Awards back in 2013.
That is a ripper, isn't it? As a visual type trophy, you probably can't do better than that one. And I was very fortunate. Like everyone basically who surfs deserves one of these. Like it's a lifestyle award. So if you lead a life that's revolving around surfing, you deserve a lifestyle award, but I guess there can only be one recipient every year. I was shortlisted the year before And by coincidence, it was 2013, which was the big, huge gala presentation in Sydney of 50 years of Surfing Australia. And that was the year that they named their top 10 surfers of the past 50 years. So here am I, the Peter Troy Lifestyle Award. It was like a, who is Bob Smith? And, there's MR there, and there's Simon there, and there's Nat there, and everyone else, and there's, little insignificant Bob sort of thing. But that was just a totally unexpected and an absolutely wonderful night, and I was so pleased it was that particular night. So you got to get up there and give a speech in front of all these people, and as I said, it's like the who's who's, and what do you say? So anyway, I said a few things about Peter Troy and went for a surf out at Torquay and 1 to 2 foot shit, but just thought of Peter as I was out there surfing. So I touched on a few things like that, and there was a very, very special moment after it was basically all over. And as you guys probably all know, Mark Richards was voted our #1 surfer of the past 50 years. And I saw Mark heading towards me, and he just came over and had a few quiet words to me about how meaningful the words were that I had said about Peter and surfing as a lifestyle. And, just a little hand on the shoulder and thanks, Bob. That was, really special. And a moment like that it's hard to describe how you feel. And the award is nice. It's a beautiful visual thing, but there's a lot more to it than that.
And that's beautiful that you received an award like that. But I can sense you kind of downplaying that a little bit. But Bob, it's people like you that give opportunities and lay the foundation for the future generations. And I didn't know that you were a teacher actually, but I guess it's obviously in your nature and, your consistency, having a job and educating people, it extends through to your, your application to surfing as well. And your awards are a testament to that. But that Bells Beach, the bells given to the guys pre-68, from a marketing standpoint, and obviously RipCurl had got you in, you said, as a historical collator, that is really for me, that cemented RipCurl as a core surf brand. Them doing that in 2011 wasn't exactly the most progressive year for longboarding development, but to actually award and recognize that those guys, won that bell and give it to them. And it was I remember seeing them on the webcast as well. It was really cool. And I think if it was ever downplayed, it shouldn't have been, because it was, from a marketing perspective, made someone like me who's very critical of brands like that really proud to be a surfer, and, almost go as far to say supporting a brand like that because they're giving back to those surfers that laid the foundation.
Yeah, that's spot on. RipCurl have got 2 wonderful co-founders, and they're a bit like cheese and chalk. Good guy, bad guy. They're really, really different in Singing and Claw. As you all know, you've all been around the comps for many, many years, and Claw is at all of those grassroots comps. He comes to Crescent, he surfs in the event, he's there at the table, he's talking to people, he's jumping up and down. It's the same at Noosa, it's the same at Rex and Relics, it's the same at Sean's event. He put on that little event called the Marley Masters when he was building the Marley homes up there. And he's just a grommet at heart. And you have someone like that as a co-founder of a company, and you can't speak highly enough of him.
Yeah, he used to make me laugh at those Marley Masters comps, because whatever age he was, he had that division that started. So as he got older, that division got older. But he'd be there and he'd just be bouncing from one leg to the other. And you knew when he was doing that, he was just having a blast.
Definitely. And it's interesting you mentioned that, the age division, but he's very, very fortunate in that a good mate of mine from Phillip Island, Laurie Thompson, Laurie's birthday is on the 1st of January. So he's got to wait a whole year before he goes into another age division. And you've got Danny Bond, whose birthday is really early in the year. So they're basically, if they're in the over 70s, they're they're 71 and a half before they get to go in the over 70s. Claw's birthday's on the 30th of December, so he goes straight into the new division straight away.
Yeah.
So you can luck out or whatever.
But we'd have an over 65s, then it would be over 66, then over 67.
I'm not sure that's quite right. I'm sticking up for him.
Yeah, I've been there at the Marley Masters a couple of times, and I actually before I went along to one, I was kind of a bit cynical about it. I was like, I was just trying to sell some of his apartments because I don't know Claw very well at all. I've said hello a couple of times over the years, but having been to a couple of those events and talking with people like Wayne Dean, who's a great my next door neighbour and a good friend there for a couple of years, and he said, "Nah, man, Claw's he just loves it. He just loves it."
Yeah.
And it's great that someone, as Matt said, someone so foundational within the surfing world is giving props to the where it all began. It's a great thing. Now, look, tell me something a bit more about this, because I was bringing this one up before. This I didn't notice at first, but Bell's Angels, love it. What's that? So the Torquay board riders. So is that a club within the club, the Bell's Angels, or is that?
We're just known as Bells is the home break. We're the Bells Angels, and I'm pretty sure Grant Forbes, well-known RipCurl designer, strong artistic background. I'm pretty sure Grant Forbes came up with that logo and the term. Bell's Angels as a play on word with Hell's Angels, obviously. Pretty clever.
That's someone you don't want to have a trademark issue with. But there's some great shots of you here surfing spread over a couple of years by the looks of things. I've got to say, Mick Marlin, I know, will be watching. He's aged a lot more since that photo of the two of you than what you have, Bob. What's are you still playing squash, or what's the go?
No squash. Squash suffered really badly. A lot of bad publicity with people having heart attacks, and it fell by the wayside. And then the Americans invented that silly game called racquetball, and that sort of took over from squash. I'm very fortunate. My beautiful wife, Noel, she's got a strong fitness background. She's been at me for years and years to stretch more and do this and do that. So that's been extremely helpful. I guess I've been lucky with my build. I'm a bit of a racing greyhound and never really put on much weight from school days. I watch really closely and talk to a lot of the older crew. And the very first thing that goes is your ability to get to your feet as an older age surfer. And I think there are a lot of contributing factors there. And one of the main contributing factors is being overweight. And the second one, I think, is not exercising. So I've got a very strict exercise program. I'm a big believer in, cardio. So I've got my speed ball and skipping for cardio, and I do some light weights home at here, a lot of stretching. I don't think it's any secret. I've had a bit of an illness over the years and last 5 or 6 years, and that basically has stopped me from going into gyms or doing any swimming. I just loved swimming, doing laps in a pool, but pools can be and gyms can be serious carriers of germs. So my wife has been absolutely sensational in devising a home program for me, and it works really, really well. So yeah, a combination of factors, as I mentioned.
Now, why have these RipCurl search photos been included? Obviously because you've been working with RipCurl as the historian, but
it's part of my job to search out old RipCurl ads and create a file. And Tuddy, Roscoe, Titchler's right behind me. We've got a gate in the back fence. Pete from Portland. Well, he was a wild boy and a really good big wave surfer. Roscoe's still shaping. I actually had my first overseas trip to American Samoa and Western Samoa in the summer of 75, 76 with Ross, and had some great times over there. Tuddy, the male model. We've been away on a few Vic teams with Tuddy, and he gets his modelling portfolio out and shows you a couple of nice-looking girls. Yeah, some characters there. Titchy, a great surfer shaper. Actually, one Tuddy story.
Yeah.
Tuddy was or as all the boys there were pretty avid Bird Rock surfers, and I was standing at the top of the Bird Rock steps when the old steps were there, and it was dead low tide, and I was watching Tuddy out there, and he's got pitched onto the reef. I saw him get out of the water, and he staggered up the steps, and I'm up at the top of the steps, and he's got his hand over his forehead like that, the top of his scalp, and he's gone, "Oh, Bob, I think I've hurt myself. I landed on the reef." And then he lifted his hand up, and half of his scalp has come off, and I'm peering down into what's inside his head. And I said, "Oh, Tuddy, put your hand back down and get to the hospital real quickly." And he needed about 40 stitches in there, and it didn't upset his modelling appearances though. But it just made me think about looking at that photo then.
You know what he's up to these days, Bob? He came down to talk to board riders like 4 or 5 years ago and chucked the modelling profile all out there, was showing us all. Do you know what he's up to right now? I haven't seen him for ages.
No, I've had a couple of, he's made a few Facebook comments on a couple of boards I've put up on Vintage Surfboard Collectors, but I haven't had any personal contact with him for a little while. So I'm not really sure what he's up to.
Yeah, right.
On the Vintage Surfboard Collectors thing, Bob, Weeksy was just flicking through some images before, and there was one of you in a tube suit, which I'm going to take a guess and say is probably Lawn Point in maybe 67 or 68, judging by the stringless with a bit of rocker. Would I be right in saying that?
Spot on. That was March, Labor Day weekend. We have a Labor Day holiday down here, which coincides with my birthday. So it's a long weekend. I was down at Lawn. That was a Fred Pike, really well-known, one of the big three down here, so to speak.
Could you get that picture up, Weeksy, if that's all right? It's one of him wearing a tube suit on a point break. Yes. And
yeah, that's at Lawn Point. Yeah, it's a Pike stringerless.
But Nathan said that never breaks, Bob.
Sorry?
Nathan said that never breaks. Don't bother going there.
Lawn in the 60s was magnificent. It was like so much fun as a young surfer, and they had this dance down there called the Wild Colonial Club right on the beach, and then you'd go over to the Arab restaurant and you'd chat up the girls, and all the tourists would come out on the point. There's no leg ropes back then, and there'd be like boards being smashed everywhere. And it was just, you couldn't find a better place to spend a Christmas in Victoria than Lawn. It was like Carnaby Street in England, so to speak. It was the place to be. They had bands at the Pacific Hotel, the Wild Colonial Club. But yeah, look, that photo there, yeah, I've got the Pike surfboard. Mm-hmm. I've got a White Stag short john on, and you may be able to see the Seiko diver's watch on my wrist. There was no such thing as surfers' watches back then. We had a diver's watch, a Seiko diver's watch that I think from memory I got for my birthday.
Have you ever been sponsored? Have you ever had, obviously apart from a strapper, I mean, have you had lucrative sponsorship deals over your years, or is it?
Yeah, millions of dollars. Yeah, you wish. Piping Hot.
In these newer photos, mate. Is longboarding just keep getting better, right?
Piping Hot looked after me with wetsuits for a while. RipCurl obviously still look after me, and looked after me for a long, long time with wetsuits, strapper surfboards. Yeah, I guess I'm a bit of a like to stay true to certainly strapper surfboards, and there's the Mondo Psycho logo, and with the strapper down there. I think that was a Fit to Blitz Piping Hot wetsuit in that era. That's a Steve Triance photo, and Steve's got some absolutely wonderful photos of all the boys down the Great Ocean Road and down south, and all of those guys in the Greg Brown, Flino, Casey, Mark Wilde, John Darby, all those guys who rode some serious big waves down south.
What are we looking at here? Is that a Dawn Patrol or a Therma 32 or something? I remember that's like 80s somewhere, eh?
that looks like a slick skin, that one, with the shiny rubber, and the sun gets on the back and it warms you up really well. And it's obviously winter with the hood on and the boots on.
That at Winky Bob?
That's Winky Pop. Yeah, I was a Winky fanatic, really narrow-minded. I just, down here you get the rock crew, the bird rock crew. They're fanatical about the rock. Ross Slavin, Morris, Jimmy Punk, those sorts of guys. Galley, although Galley was spread himself out a lot more than some of the others did. You get Brooko, Rod Brooks. Brooko was fanatical about bells, just had the perfect style for bells, that low centre of gravity. He was really strong through his hips and really flexible through his knees and ankles. And at the bowl, Brooko was as good as anyone. And he always got that sweet spot, that took off right on the bowl, not way inside, but took off right on the bowl and had that really good style for bells. I just felt really comfortable at Winky Pop and felt my style was really suited to Winky Pop and that down the line aspect, and just fell in love with it. Surfed it for many, many years and still go back there. I have a thing in the back of my brain. I have to surf Winky Pop at least once a month, and I do that. And I have these little aims in surfing all the time that help to keep me going. And this year's aim, being 2020, my aim was to surf 2020 waves.
Nice.
And how many have you
How are you
surfed?
going so far?
Yeah.
August the 27th, I hit 2020.
Oh,
Wow, well done.
And look, I've been lucky enough to catch Winky good a couple of times. I've never seen bells better than Winky. It sort of does my head in that the bells is packed and there's a lot less people at Winky Pop. But when it's a solid, anywhere around the 6 foot mark, it just keeps going and going and going. You go past the next stairs and the next stairs and the next stairs. You must have some paddling skills, and you have to stay fit to be surfing a place like that.
Mentioned 6 foot then, and when it's 6 foot and there's a bit of water on the reef, like 3/4 tide coming onto high tide, you can actually take off at uppers, and because there's enough water on the reef, you can get through lowers and you get right down through the valley on, as long as the swell direction is perfectly straight and it's hitting right. And, that's just a wonderful wave to be able to surf when it's like that.
And I noticed you said about you preferred the 20s and the pretty radical tails from Strapper in the 80s, the late 70s. That would suit Winky a lot better, I would imagine, than the Bell's Bowl.
Definitely, and really good for Rincon. The best size for Rincon is 3 to 4 foot. Over that, it sections too much, as you probably know, Maddie, and goes through to the bowl. But Rincon at 3 to 4 foot on a high tide, the 20s were perfect for them. And the Strapper 20s were based on the Mark Richards 20s, the swallowtails and the hard abrupt flies and the whole design aspect of them. And, Mark was just brilliant out at Rincon and at Bells, but, obviously he's an exceptional surfer. So Mark's boards were really good boards to base a twin fin on. Whereas you go over to the East Coast and their beach break waves were totally different. And the majority of the twin fins that were made on the East Coast had round tails on them and really suited to their beach break. So that's where local knowledge comes in.
And who the best out of each era, say, which, pretty much there was different boards in each era, who surfed bells the best, say, from the 60s through to now, each era?
Yeah, it's really interesting you say that, because back in, when was it, 2006, we actually chose, well, when I say we, Surfing Victoria, chose the best 10 surfers of all time from 1956 and the following 50 years. And I was on the selection panel. I was part of the selection panel, and it's really important to set the criteria out. And one of the criteria was that there had to be one surfer in the top 10 from each decade, so from 56 to 66. So we really had to go back in history and work that out as far as who the best surfers were in different decades. And the two people we came up in that first 56 to 66 were Terry Wall and Peter Troy. And then you get into the Rod Brooks era, and Rod was a Monty number one in that era. and then you've got, like a young Wayne coming into it, and a Morris Cole, and then you're getting into the next eras, and you've got all these other people, Troy Brooks, Sean Brooks, Gary Taylor, Ringer from Phillip Island, etc. But as far as bells goes, I just love watching Rod out there. Rod was just sensational for the reasons I said before. He had no fear, big, small, no fear. The bigger it got, the more he liked it. His positioning, his body type. And Rod told me a story a long time ago. Rod, you see those surfers who are really, really quick to their feet on the takeoff, and Rod was exceptionally quick, and he put it all down to growing up down in the Brighton, Hampton area and surfing the bay, and it was just all wind chop. He said you had to be quick to your feet. So, and you could certainly see that in his surfing at Bells.
Interesting.
You mentioned Bird Rock before. I was reading just today, and I'd read the article before, but you jump off Bird Rock every year. So in front of the surf spot is the big rock. It's pretty hard to climb up. So tell us a bit about that.
That was my 70th birthday, and I'd been jumping off it. Everyone jumps off Bird Rock, over summertime, and it's like the local spot for the kids to hang and charge around the beach, and there might not be any swell, and you'll see 20 kids up there, and then you see a little 9 or 10-year-old, and the older kids are trying to coax him to jump off, and he'll take 3 steps forward and then 25 steps back, and he's not quite game enough, and they're all down the bottom and egging him on. And I just it was another one of those little things that, I'm growing older but not up, and I just wanted to do something that I guess was young at heart for my 70th birthday, and just got up there in my wetsuit and jumped off. Life in the old dog yet.
Are you going to keep doing it every year?
No, I better not wait till I'm 80. I might not be here, but I thought I'd better start doing it every year, maybe.
The way you're going, I reckon you'll be jumping off at 80 and 90 for sure.
Yeah, well, let's hope so. A lot of people falling over at the moment, and a great musician that I loved seeing, Jerry Jeff Walker, one of the Texas musicians, passed away the other day, and very privileged to see him on his only trip back here in 1982 or so, and a lot of people falling over. So you got to live your life and make the most of it.
Have you ever been a kneeboarder, Bob? There's just the reason I ask is there's a photo that popped up in the collection here, and it looks like the spoon type boards in amongst there.
Yeah, well, just as importantly as the spoons, what's the wave in the background?
That looks a bit like Winky, but
that's Winky Pop. I love that photo.
It's magic. And does it always break side on like that? I won a mystery flight, and the day before I found out that it was a flight to Melbourne. So I got over there and hired a hire car and zoomed on down with a tiny little surfboard, and it was looked like maybe about double that size of that, but really side on, like almost like a 45-degree angle to the base of the cliffs there, or it's an
interesting angle, isn't it? It's probably not quite angled that much, but it has a decent angle to it. Our swells come from the southwest, and they go from west through to east, and that's a pretty good angle for it. But going back to the spoons, Jim Winneman from Hawaii got in touch with me, and he asked me to write the Australian content in a magnificent book that he put out called The Ultimate Guide to Surf Collectibles, etc. And he asked me to write the Australian content, and I tend to think I only got the job because he probably approached several other well-known journalists, and they probably wanted too much money, and so I offered to do it for basically nothing as an interesting project, and really enjoyed it. But his first directive to me was he wants the history of Australian surfboard riding in half a page, and obviously that's an impossibility. So I managed to get 20 pages and just broke it up into sections, the solid wood and then the toothpicks and then 56, etc. I think I called it Snapshots in Time, and they wanted a bit of a blurb about you, and I said to Jim, I'm not writing about myself, and that's where my wife Noel jumped in and road. Yeah, he's a teacher, he's a surfer, he's a dad, he's this and that. But
I was
and
wondering
they're-
what this up here was.
yeah,
Oh, the wife.
yeah.
Now
I've got to thank her.
this sexagenarian. I mean, unless they're missing a T, or you just fit in all sorts of areas of life.
Yeah, well, I think I'm a septuagenarian now, aren't I? Yeah. So yeah, but they're two of my favourite boards, and you know, we're talking about Victorian surfers, and you just can't go past Wayne Lynch. So, and that's one of
What's the
Wayne
black
shaped board.
The timber laminate board.
That's called a Tinkler Tail. A guy called Bob Tinkler came up with that idea. And it has a mechanism inside it, and you go out and surf and you could loosen or tighten these screws there, and it would tighten up one part of the board. It's all about flex. It's all related back to Greeno and all about flex. And obviously, commercially, it was too expensive to produce. They are actually probably the rarest surfboard in Australia, maybe the world. And with collecting, that gets down to those two aspects of rarity or desirability. And you know, there's guys out there who've got 25 Michael Peterson boards, but they've got no chance of getting a Tinkler Tail. And I know from a collecting point of view, if I had 20 Michael Peterson boards, I would gladly give one away to get a Tinkler Tail. But that's a very personal thing. Wayne, I did a lot of my early surfing down at Lawn because of my cousin. I had a campsite down there, so I got to stay there with my cousin all over Christmas. And Wayne, I think, he's born in 52. He's 5 years younger than me. He was only a little kid when I was going down there. And I've never, ever seen anyone with a more natural feel and natural talent, a feel for he just looked completely right on a surfboard from a very, very young age. And I felt very, very privileged to watch him in the early surfing days. He'd be out at Lawn Point and we'd be out there and we'd see Wayne coming. We'd actually get out of the water and just sit there to watch him. And, you know, he's taking off backhand and he's switch footing and he's in the tube and he just looked perfect. And the stupidity of, you know, one of the stupid, silly things we used to say, because there didn't seem to be many goofy foots around. And we used to say, oh, you know, what a shame that Wayne's a goofy foot. You know, how good would it be if he was a natural foot? But it's just a stupid comment. But just gifted like you wouldn't believe and looked totally right on a surfboard. And yeah, and then he went from being, you know, that small kid up Lawn to being probably the first person to venture down south into bigger waves, surfing by himself, surfing with Morris or one other mate, surfing in shark-infested waters. Size wasn't a problem. And then he's shaping, and I'm sure Wayne would be the first to agree that the first couple of boards he shaped were, you know, probably ordinary. And then he developed into a magnificent shaper. And you look at some of his boards, and I look at them from around that, you know, that perhaps 1972, 73, 74 era, and he really nailed it in regards to what he wanted out of a surfboard and being able to shape that into how he wanted to surf. And he's one of those unique people that you meet in life. We had an old boys luncheon, and just Wayne used to come along before he moved up north, and there'd be, you know, 6 or 8 of us, and Wayne would come along and talk story. And he's a bit like Claw and Simon Buttonshaw also, who I think you probably all know. You'll be just sitting there talking with them, and they'll come from left field somewhere, and they come out with these thoughts that are sort of beyond ordinary, and they're different. They see things from a different perspective, and they're wonderful people to be around and listen to and learn a lot from.
You just were talking about Wayne. I guess someone saying he's going to be how good would it be if he was a natural footer, but that generational goofy foot quirkiness in my brain stems back to, say, someone like Kevin Brennan. You know, and you move forward to Wayne, and then there's a whole heap of funky, goofy footers through the 70s and 80s. But then I think of someone like Occy, and then a guy like Aussie Wright, the air guy. Then I think of, the current world champion, Italo Ferreira. And it's that, it is not that structured, natural foot style that is passed on from, say, Phil Edwards to Nat, or Midget to Nat, Nat to MP, MP to Rabbit, Rabbit to Curran, Curran to Slater. And, you get that forehand structure for a natural footer on a right-hand point break. But I feel like Wayne broke all that. And, in my mind, when I think of the professionals after Wayne, tend to embody a little bit of Wayne in that animalistic attack. You even watch Jay Bay in the last five years, and it is so hard to beat a goofy footer out there, and Bells, guys like Matt Wilkinson, Ace Buck, and Owen Wright are just, you can't beat a guy going vertical on a point break. And in my brain, it kind of stems back to Wayne's, head sort of swiveling and just going, oh, I want to go up there, doing it, and then making boards that worked for him to do that.
Yeah, really, really valid points, and I'm really pleased you said that. And I'm really pleased you said the two words going vertical. Being a little bit older and going vertical, the shortening of the boards from the Mells to the V bottoms, and I don't really think we went vertical. The boards shortened in length. We did sort of, roller coasters and re-entries. We didn't surf the nose. It was sort of taboo. You don't get on the nose sort of thing, and we're involved in all of that. But going vertical, to me, that was two people and both goofy foots. And I'm sure you can, Wayne obviously is one, and the other one's very, very obvious from Narrabeen. Cole Smith, obviously.
Yep, absolutely.
And they were the two, to me, they went vertical, really vertical.
Yeah. Well, it's evident in the images too, of the era. You can tell the speed that Cole Smith was going. He's going Mach 10 in all his images. He's curled up in a little ball and a little high line, projecting so hard on those North Narrabeen lefts, and on his backside, his whole body was contorted. And, obviously Wayne too, just with his, I remember Bob McTavish says it in his book, and he also has said it verbally too. He just remembers Wayne standing on a board or a blank, and him sort of looking at his ankles, just going, wow, like this guy's, he can turn, like I think he said 45 degrees with his ankle bending and twisting, and that had part to do with his ability to do things that other people couldn't. And I suppose it's just the images I see of Wayne in that tube suit in that evolution era is just so, he's surfing Torquay, or I don't know, where is he? He's surfing somewhere in between. What's that wave that they're surfing in between Bird Rock and Winky, is it? Is that in between sort of wave?
Boobs and steps.
There's steps and there's boobs in between.
Boobs, yeah. They're surfing one of those waves, and you just see Wayne swiveling his body around. And for me, that was almost one of the first. I know, you got Nat and Bob going crazy on the V-bottoms in Hawaii, but for me, it's in terms of like a shortboard section, seeing Wayne rotate his body like that, he was the first guy to really sort of do that.
We spoke about Rod before, and Rod's body shape, Rod Brooks' body shape for surfing bells, and then you mentioned Occy as a goofy foot, and I don't think anyone's ever surfed bells anywhere near Occy, and you mentioned Italo also, but I was fortunate enough to judge the skins event after the RipCurl.
Oh, how good is that? That's got to be.
That's right up there with the best viewing pleasure ever. I think it was ABC ran the skins, and Occy was like, he won a Suzuki Sierra or something, didn't he, as well, in amongst it all?
And like 80 grand, it was 10 grand to eat.
And then he couldn't drive it. He jumped in. It was a manual car, and he's like kangaroo hopped it up. He had no idea how to drive it. But yeah, it was.
I think while we're throwing out the goofies, we're going to get Barton Lynch in there as someone who's quite a proud longboarder of himself. And Tommy Carroll doesn't mind getting out on a bigger board as well himself.
Yeah, but you look at Occy's body shape, through the backside and the thighs and that low centre of gravity, and perfect body for surfing bells backhand.
So they say bells is all about the bottom turn, and position. Like I said, I've never had a good day at Bells, but is it as tricky as what people say?
Yeah, it is a tricky wave. A lot of the pros struggle with it. And we've got that situation where waves come in sets, and you can have big lulls out there, and you can get out of position, and you can be looking. You can score a heat at like half tide, and do you go over to rink on, or do you sit in the bowl? And a lot of people can get caught in between. And I think we had that famous final where
Kelly.
Was it? Martin Potter, I think. Martin Potter before Kelly, but I think there was 12 minutes to go, and Martin needed like a 3.5 or something, and not one single wave came to him. And yeah, I think the one you're referring to, Jason, is the one with Bede, and Bede had Kelly done and dusted, and there's like I think 2 minutes to go or something, and Kelly's done the bolt over to Rincon, and there hadn't been one wave surfed over there, and the pros don't like Rincon, and Kelly's bolted over there and took off on one with 30 seconds to go or something, and busted this big air, and yeah, like, it was controversial, the score, but he won it. Poor Bede is sitting there thinking, you don't go to Rincon.
What was that?
Made the right decision.
Was Ockie and Curran, with Curran on his Black Beauty board? Was it 86 or something? I remember as a kid, we taped it on VHS off the TV, and I watched that over and over and over again, because being a goofy footer myself, it was kind of like, but you can't argue with someone like Curran, and he's probably iconic as well in his surfing style, and it fits so nicely in with the pace of the Bells Bowl.
The other one was Shane and Tommy Carroll, classic Rincon that Shane won, and forehand, backhand. And
a big shout out to Jodie Cooper as well, West Australia represent. I think she came second. She came second at Bells for like a decade before she won.
Great surfer.
And I'm just going to cut you all off, but we've got probably about almost half an hour over time, so we probably have to finish it up. But yeah, we'd probably love to have another episode.
You're so mean, Nathan. You're so mean.
Can I tie it in with one other pivotal piece of surf history, just to tie it in? So Bob started off talking about the 56 Olympics. Now, another huge piece of memorable surfing history from Bells is that heat with, there was Terry Fitz, Mark Richards, and Simon Anderson. We had the singles, the 20s, and the thrusters in that one event. Were you there for that event at Bells?
Is that the 81 one you're
81.
talking about?
Yeah.
There were expression sessions, and is that the one you're talking about?
Yeah. So you had the three different boards all ridden in the same event. Terry at the height of his surfing, on a radical single fin. You had Simon unveiling the his performance and his dominant animalistic powerhouse surfing on the thruster, and then you had MR buzzing around on his twin fin as well. So
magic moments.
Yeah.
I think the other thing that's worth realising about 81 and the thruster, Simon surfed against Shane in the final, and Shane was arguably the best small wave surfer in the world at the time. And it was like 2 to 3 foot, well, 3 foot. It was 3 foot Rincon. And it really proved that the thruster worked on the big Saturday, the huge waves, and then once again at small Rincon.
I'm going to help Nathan out here, Bob, because I've been sitting here laughing my head off in the background, because this happens to me every week. And the better the guest, the harder it is to drag ourselves away. But we're talking about iconic surf breaks. You are an icon of the sport. Thanks for joining us. But Nath, you've done a fantastic job, mate. I'm going to throw it back to you to wrap it up for the week. Just to give you a chance to, I'll put us into, there we go. We're in Brady Bunch mode, so we're all on the screen at the same time.
Yeah, no, just thanks for coming on. Bob, it's great to have you as the first Victorian guest. We haven't had any yet. So, and yeah, probably starting off with arguably the most iconic sort of Victorian figure of the last sort of 50, 60 years. So thanks a lot for coming on. Sean, who we got on next week? Do you know, or are we still figuring it out?
Not yet. We haven't confirmed our guest for next week. I mean, we just about go with Bob for week 2.
Yeah, come back for the other half of the story.
But yeah, no, we'll announce that during the week as to who we've got on. We've got about 3 that are in the wings waiting, so just needed to confirm.
You're on Facebook though, Bob. I noticed a lot of your fans have started saying g'day on the page and that, and asking a few questions. Would you be able to drop on the Oz Longboarding page and interact with a few of those over the next couple of days if people have some questions for you?
We would love to.
I see Steve Riverland reckons you're an absolute gentleman in and out of the water. As Matt suggested earlier on, you're an understated gentleman all round. As from a commentator's point of view, I've had the pleasure of seeing you compete, and from speaking to your peers, people that I really respect. Gary McCormick was one of the first to jump on and say g'day. Always a good indication of the man as to who the people he calls friends, and it seems like all the best of the best are in your corner. So a great statesman of our sport. Thanks very much for joining us with some of those stories, but I'm sure we're just scratching the surface. Ian Borland's saying something about can't wait till the borders open up so he can get back up to Noosa to get some Bell's ice. It sounds like a dodgy joke.
Yeah.
Like a dodgy joke.
Talk to my wife, like she wants to get back to Noosa so badly. But no, thanks all you guys. Really enjoyed it. And look, the bottom line with all this, the whole surfing thing, collecting whatever. The bottom line is always you go surfing. You're in the water.
Yeah.
Unreal.
Stoked to have you on board, mate. It really, yeah. I know I didn't say much tonight. I was too busy listening to, like I've known you a long time, and I was just going, oh, well, I didn't know this, didn't know that. Yeah, so it was really interesting.
Come on, Sean, wrap it up, mate. We've got to go.
All right. Okay, the only thing I've got coming up for anyone that's interested, up at the Kira Community Hall from the 10th to the 20th of November, there's an exhibition, exhibition by Dave Sturmer of a lot of the Kira locals that hang around there in the mornings. People can get up, have a look at it, and all the paintings that are there will be up for auction, with the money going to the disabled surfers here on the Gold Coast.
Not only that, vote one rabbit.
Yep, mate, that'll be Saturday, so be interesting to see how he goes. Yeah.
All right, awesome, guys.
All right.
Thanks for coming on. As Weeksy would say, wave to your mothers. And we'll see
And
you
if you do have any suggestions as to who you think would be a fantastic guest for us to have on the show, drop us a line, because we can't just keep inviting in all our good mates. But been a good one. Thanks heaps, Bob.
Thank you.
Thanks, Bob.
We'll see you all next week for episode 25 of Oz Longboarding. And a round of applause for Nathan Riverland. Great job there hosting, Nath. Might be able to have a week off next week after all.
Oh, he might not. Hey, he might be doing that job again. All right. Thank you, crew.
Longboard talk.